Chris showed me how he prepared for one of his interviews, and that was so amazing for me. He was given a case study, and on that case study, he actually jotted down like what a product manager or a program manager or whoever is deciding these things should do. Since then, I'm begging him to come here and share. He has the framework, which I think we all can learn from.
Welcome, the cohort 4 community members that have joined us, and Mahesh, the superstar that has really helped us bring together everybody and really creating a world-class community of AI product managers. I'm also very excited about the fact that if you guys look at what we discussed last week, Mahesh really, kudos to him. He talked about how agents are so important, and he thought it's going to be next year. It's amazing how his prediction was great. It turned out that within a couple of days, OpenAI announced all the new functionalities that made his talk more relevant. So that's another thing that we're very excited about. Maybe Mahesh wants to say a couple of things about it pretty quickly. But the third thing that I wanted to quickly say is that we're going to spend some time today to kind of look at how AI product manager interviews are being done. Chris is here for us. He's one of the alumni of the cohort, and he's going to share with us his experience. But I want to pass this to Mahesh, since he is the star that has been really helping us with bringing everything together. Mahesh, to you, and then from there on, we can go to Chris.
Thank you, Bijan, first of all, and thanks for the opportunity. I know in this community, all of you are like more important than me. So first of all, thank you for joining. Second of all, believe me, last week, I had no clue that, whatever OpenAI is going to join or do, and I made a guess. Mosin can keep true that even I said if Sam Altman doesn't go agents, then I'm better than him. Seems like I have a lot to cover. So seems like at least we are converging, but he's ahead. So one day we will converge better. But at least that tells you, right, that at least we are on the right path. And I don't means when I predicted it, I could be wrong today, but luckily I was right. But doing these predictions is what we are trying to learn. If this community is heading in right direction, if we are talking about the right things, if we are looking at right signals here, then together as a community or as some of all of us, we will be making right decisions, first for ourselves, second for the companies that we serve, and third for this community, right? So first of all, thanks to that, welcome Gaurav. I meet Gaurav during a trail, and I added him, so he's here. So just wanted to say hi to him. He's become a very good friend. And all that, I think today I'm super excited. Chris, I think I loved like working with Chris all along. He was part of our third cohort, and he taught me a lot. Did this interview process. No. Believe me, he will share his process. Means I prepare for interviews. I continue to interview no matter what. Whoever wants to interview me, I interview just to see like what people are asking, and always ask for double the money. If they give me, I'm happy to change also. This is a recorded call, by the way. So I never change. So sorry, cut that. But but Chris showed me his like how he prepared for one of his interviews, and that was so amazing for me. And he was given a case study, and on that case study, he actually jotted down like what a product manager or a program manager or whoever is deciding these things should do. And I since then I'm begging him to come here and share, because I always talk about more like concepts and ideas and what next, but he has the framework, which I think we all can learn from. So Chris, all yours. Bijan, all yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So Chris, I'll pass it to you. Let me know if you need anything. I'm trying to remove the I feel like I'm in a battle with these autopilots. It's like I remove one and then
I will help.
Pop up. It's like they're like spreading like wildfires, man. But almost done. But go ahead, you can get started, Chris.
Yep. All right, cool. So I will talk a little bit about my experience. So like in general, and hopefully everybody, can you see my screen? I try to make it so that you can see my monitor, but you should see a AL Technical Program Manager.
On Zoom, we're seeing your Zoom white background.
That is unfortunate. All right, let's try that again. All right. And let's see if we can do it again. All right. Maybe that we have a. Let's try that. No.
Yes.
All
Works,
right.
it works.
Perfect. Perfect. All right. So like so this aside, like so let's talk about a little bit about my interview experience. So in like a typical product manager, program manager interview, you're gonna have they're gonna be like some type of case study that comes up to test the knowledge of the system, and kind of you know, this is overall my experience. This is working kind of with Bloomberg throughout to be a technical program manager. Now, I'll talk a little bit about like some of the processes that really help, but definitely shout out to Mahesh for helping me with this. Shout out to I also had some other help that helped me like assess some better ways of doing this. So like there's a lot of people that went into this process, so it's not just like some crazy concept that I came up with, but I appreciate that the concept that was possible. All right, so first of all, the challenge, right? So my challenge overall was inference benchmarking. So this is a like one of the challenges that exists within Bloomberg is that you have a model that's in production. You can create a prototype very quickly for an AI, but there are several things that happen in production environments that aren't really truly replicated in those prototypes. So you're trying to create a benchmarking service. Now, this particular team is designed essentially to help AI engineers. One of the weird things of Bloomberg is Bloomberg has quite a different infrastructure than most companies that you will run into. So I can talk a little bit about that as well. But in general, this is what they prompted me with. This is kind of the overall system that they gave me to handle. And it's kind of vague. They didn't really get quite too much, but we can get into that in a little bit here as well. So meeting starts, and they say, okay, latency is the concern. So that
Chris, can I take 5 minutes? Sorry.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
Just go back to your problem statement. I just
Sure,
want to
yeah.
explain like what the problem is for everybody.
Yep, hang on one second.
Because I'm good at like explaining problems, and then you are so awesome at solution. So I think the question is, they are saying that, hey, there are a few terms that just got in there, and I want to make sure that we all have the common understanding. Most of the new cohort people today join, so I want to lay down because
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
we're just introducing them to what is a parameter, and here we are talking about benchmarking.
Okay, fair enough.
So let's go like step by step, 5 things, and then I will give back to Chris. Let's talk about these 5 things real quick, okay? So I think today, at least the first part of the cohort knows what a machine learning model is. Machine learning model is functions that has parameters. Example, 175 billion parameters in a GPT model, which is running Chat GPT. Good, so far with me? Okay, this is a model. Second thing his problem is saying is that, hey, you have a model, but in a minute, how many questions it can answer, right? So every model will have a different way, depending upon what hardware it is running, what is the size of the model, and how much optimization you have done on your infrastructure to run this model faster. So you need to know, let's say you are sending this model one image, let's say my image, and you are asking, is it Mahesh or not? Right? So this is called one inference, which is one forward pass in the model to predict yes or no on Mahesh. Still with me? Chris keeps saying yes. No, we don't care about anybody.
You guys all see it comfortably. or
Yeah.
do we need to end the screen share?
Yeah, just end the screen, Chris, for a second.
All right, I can end
I think
the
we
screen
got.
share.
I will
No
lay down the
problem.
challenge.
I apologize. I apologize for that.
No, you're good. You're doing great, by the way, Chris. I know I ended your flow. That's what I do to people.
Don't worry. This is fine. This is perfect.
So, what is a model? The second is what is inference. So this is model. This is inference, the process of sending something to the model and getting a prediction back is the process of inference. Now, the third thing that they are talking in the problem is benchmarking. So they keep changing this model, right? So this has version 1, this has version 2, and similarly, they have many models, right? So this is one kind of models. They can have many kind of models like this. And now, let's say this inference, they can do 30 images per minute. With this model right now, they are saying, hey, Mahesh, you're launching this new model. You need to benchmark your model. So the process of benchmarking is running the model across these data sets. It's not only one image. Now they have these thousands of images and with various different sizes, different things, like one only have Mahesh, one Mahesh with his kids, and one Mahesh and Bijan. And they will run them and come up with this number, which is 10 pictures per minute. Right? So last time when the model was not trained, we were at 10. After we trained the model, or we came up with new data, or we came up with new model, they do this process called benchmarking, which is marking for each input for that model, or if the model changes or data changes, they continuously run that. Similarly, they can change their infrastructure, right? They can buy new, faster GPUs, and then they are doing faster inference. So large companies have this process of benchmarking. And now going back to his problem, share that, Chris, now.
Yep.
What they are asking you as a product manager is that, hey, inference benchmarking model as a service. So right now, what's happening inside any big company, let's call it FOO, that each team is doing its own benchmarking because they build a model, they run it, they find new data, they run it, the new hardware, they run it, new things, they run it. They're saying, hey, why not combine this as one thing inside our company and offer this as a service to all the teams? So now this team will take your model as an input and give and data and tell you what is the speed, like 30 frames per second or 10 frames per second, 10 inference per second or 20 inference per second. And now each team needs not to maintain this benchmarking infrastructure. And you are a product manager of this benchmarking model as a service team. Now let's do what you want to do. So now let's read the statement again. Inference benchmarking model as a service. When deploying machine learning model, initial efforts are often put on measuring metrics, which one metrics was how many images per second, how the model will perform on a given task, right? So that's like just I measure speed. You can also measure accuracy. You can also measure other three or things like similarity, coherence. This step is crucial, important, but when moving model to production, you want to do benchmarking before you do it to production, right? Because if it is bad, you don't want to push it. One of these additional factors is how many inference per second on a single model is capable of performing. He's talking about the same. One matrix is that. And then he's saying, then we would like you to move to the group through planning. Benchmarking, we would like you to first facilitate a design discussion on inference benchmarking service. That allows you to benchmark their model for production serving. Then we would like you to move to group through planning, the execution, technical design. So this is the offer you're going to give. As a product manager, you are launching a new service which takes user data, user model, and run benchmarks. One benchmark they want you to focus on is speed. How much inference or how many images you can process per minute. That's the problem. That's the challenge. I hope I'm not taken all your time. But
No, you're fine. That's great.
Today,
That's
all days yours,
info.
right? I need to leave early. That's why I wanted to make sure I can land all the ideas upfront. Go ahead, Chris, all yours.
That's wonderful. Okay, cool. So then the next part is like Mahesh said, the major concern here is latency. Now there's two types of latency to keep in mind, and this is something that that I kind of learned after the fact in full transparency here. So this is so inference latency is exactly what Mahesh said, how long it takes for your model to make its prediction, but there's also the time it takes to gather all of its data and perform that, and that's kind of service latency. So had I done this again, I would have maybe specified a little bit more. I focus mostly on inference latency as what they put in, but this is something that is in general like two different things. So the meeting kind of starts. I talked to the product manager of like, hey, why are we doing this benchmarking service, right? This is the main part of the facilitation conversation. And I'll get into who the players are, as that'll be helpful. So there is a technical architect, there's a UI interface developer, there's a backend developer, an ML service operations person, as well as a product manager. And what I'm doing in this case is facilitating the discussion as to how we're going to develop this particular service. And I think it's a little bit helpful. Now I'll go into kind of like what my approach is, right? In general. So first, hopefully you guys can learn something from this as well. So some background about Bloomberg. Bloomberg owns its own data center for production models due to privacy and security concerns for its financial clients. But the training itself is done through a completely different infrastructure. The training is done through an AWS structure to speed up the training process. So this is something that is unique to Bloomberg. So what that means, and Mahesh can probably offer a little bit more detail about this, is that Bloomberg does not have access to the cloud GPUs. They have a very set amount of GPUs that they own. So the scaling is very important for them. And so this and also there's a disconnect in between what maybe their dev or staging environments versus their production environments that they run into. They do not have the same kind of infinite ability as some of the other cloud providers do in this case. Mahesh, do you want to touch on that a little bit more?
So 2 or 3 things here. One is, as a product manager, when you are planning your workloads, it's not that anybody has infinite AI compute. Nobody has that, especially with kind of demand every cloud provider today has. To get your resources aligned is not easy. We don't get it. Like internal service has to wait to get their GPU quotas right. Now, the challenge with Bloomberg, like external customers or any cloud provider, is that you cannot predict your workloads. So the challenge is that you either go take reserved instances, which is you can reserve your capacity, but even if you're not using them, you're paying for them. The second is, oh, now I need to run benchmarking. I need these 3 units for 3 days. We don't have that for you. So you stay in line and I have 300 customers in front of you. So it's a cost versus availability challenge. If you have deep pockets, you can reserve these. The cloud provider will charge you even if you're not using them. On demand is always scarce and always has a delay, especially for last 2 years. So that's the situation in the market. So if you're designing, if you're taking on product management, if you are designing your enterprise workloads, please consider getting some reserved instances, at least to unblock your teams. Or what Chris is doing, optimizing your hardware, what you have already bought, to do additional work. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah. So one of the also interesting concerns that happens within Bloomberg is Bloomberg has a very large AI engineering force that's maybe not as big as some companies, but it's quite large in terms of what happens here, and that creates a different concern that we'll get into later. But that's also why this benchmarking service is needed. As Mahesh talked about, there's quite a bit that goes into like the AI engineers in general and creating their own services here. They're an open source contributor to the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. So that's a Linux foundation. So they're very open to open source materials. They do not have like strong like, hey, we only do this proprietary thing behind a walled garden. They contribute a lot into the open community. And then they also have their own proprietary Bloomberg GPT that is powering a lot of the services that they offer within this. So let's first get to the very reasonable part, is that it's impossible to plan a full service in an hour. It is not truly, like, it's truly impossible. If you try to do that, I can tell you that as a person that has attempted to do that in interviews past, it is not reasonable, and you will fail trying to plan an entire service in an hour. So what I really tried to do is kind of set the team up for success. Like, what's the core reason that we're building this? What are the risks and points of clarification? What address why we were doing this and what success looks like? Who is the development for? What and kind of create a potential path forward, how we can do this, and also highlight team members that aren't in this. You'll notice that in my key members, there was no security person, there was no privacy person, there was no legal ramifications, there's no any of these type of players that are like traditionally part of the AI build and process. They were not involved. So like highlighting that you at least know about them, and then kind of create a communication timeline so that we can build a successful launch. That's where like Mahesh really helped me out with that. So I also focus on staying on one screen. I'll show you like kind of my business canvas here in a little bit, but after I get through this PowerPoint. But in general, there's created a business canvas for internal products and internal focus for a developer. And then I took a risk register and kind of made it into a bunch of Post-it notes, and so that we could those risks were addressed like kind of on the fly, and I wasn't switching screens on people too much. And then also I kind of created a rough timeline for launch in order to build this out. Some practice tips. As I mentioned, I worked with a program manager to practice. I must have practiced like 4 or 5 times through an hour session or so. I really focused on 2 different things, like, and different personalities, and some working with people. I built this structure, and so that I was pretending I was already at the company, not that I was interviewing for a job. So like trying to pretend like I was already part of the solution. One thing I also did, and we'll get into this as Mahesh kind of alluded to, I built a large outline for potential answers that I had on my phone, and I could reference at any time throughout the conversation. So that building that as well. And then Mahesh helped me build this timeline. So let's go to the actual discussion. This is exactly what my screens looked like at the time. I had a laptop, and then I had a Zoom full of people, and a phone over here. So I'll show you kind of like what I think it's probably important now to go over to the business canvas that be a little bit more interesting for people. And I'll show that. Can you see that now by any chance? Can someone confirm that?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. Okay, cool. So in general, like I mentioned, we went over to this, had the we have a latency use case. So like one thing I think would be interesting for this group is to kind of like walk through kind of how I did this, and I will learn something as well, and kind of like what you would potentially have done. I'll guide you through some of the steps that I did, but I'll ask questions at each step, and then I think that'll be helpful for me, and also for you to kind of get an idea as to how this went. So I had the problem statement here. That's where I focused on first. Now the next step I focused on is kind of our unique value proposition. So there's 2 different things that came into this. So I really felt that we were doing this, one, to value developer time. As Mahesh mentioned, if they're developing their own service, they're developing their own service, this is something that is going to take the developer more time, and their output is going to be less just by necessity. And the other thing is like a centralized solution. One of the things that is also happening here that Mahesh kind of alluded to is everybody's building their own solution. So what is the true measure of what they're building? What is the benchmark? That everybody has different benchmarks for their own different model, whatever that may be. Or in some cases, as we kind of talked through the discussion, there was no model at all. So like no benchmarking at all with the service. So but that's not the only thing. Does anyone have any other value props that that they think would be interesting for this benchmarking service that they want to add here? I'm happy to add them.
How about optimizing infrastructure cost?
Yeah, that's good. Anyone else?
Easier to deploy or to manage in future any changes.
Shorter lead time for go-to-market.
Sorry, say that one more time.
Shorter lead time to go to market.
Okay. Okay, cool. No, those are all really good. One of the weirder things that you'll also see with these interviews in general is that you do only have an hour. So you kind of have to get used to the idea that even though this discussion is going in an interesting direction, you kind of are forced almost to cut off conversations and move into the direction of like on the benefit of the program. And that's something I like felt that that Bloomberg was looking for, is like kind of driving, being the driving force of like designing, and instead of that. And you kind of see that in the next part. So the next part that I talked about is customer segments. And so like, what is our target internal customer? Is it the researcher? Is it the AI engineer directly? Is it the person that's the ML ops person that's deploying these kind of like, what is our service, geared around, and which environment even is it geared around, was kind of like a hotly debated topic. So we decided through our discussion that we built like a production, and we built a production system, and then we were going to monitor during deployment specifically, as the service was ramping up, as a way to check. But that's not the only way that we can do that. Does anyone else have a customer segment that they particularly feel like a inference benchmarking service would be helpful for?
Finance or legal or anything.
Okay, yeah, sure.
How about DevOps or SRE?
Mm-hmm.
And a platform as a place for future experimentation too. So, business, I would say.
Okay. So like business facing dashboard of some kind, or something like that, or what are you imagining?
Yeah, it's more in terms of like experimentation for future, use of
You mean
models.
like a research?
Research, yeah, I think that would be.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. Gotcha. Okay, cool. Thank you guys for that. Thank you guys for that. Now that we've kind of developed our now we kind of developed our three main things. Now you'll notice that I kind of went across these, and I'm skipping around. Now the question is like, the question that we had next is like kind of like, okay, what does success look like within this? So we kind of went into like, what are our key metrics? What are the key metrics first? We didn't really end up designing the solution yet. We mostly focused on the key metrics, because when we started talking about the solution, it wasn't clear exactly how they were going to do that. So there's quite a bit of, we'll get down to that in a second, as like a little bit of a teaser, I guess. But like we went into the key metrics. So the three things that we mentioned through this is that they had a CSAT survey that was low across AI engineers that they were using the service. So they wanted to increase that. They also had adoption of the service across the teams in general, both on a few different fronts. So both on the engineering front and on like the amount of engineers that were using it, but also on the number of models that were using it, because they wanted to kind of see the disparity between those two. Does anyone else have any key metrics that they think would be interesting for this?
Chris, I have a question on customer segmentation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I see that there is production, deployment, and all that listed as customer segmentation. But the question I had is the way I understand the challenge and how Mahesh explained about inference, like benchmarking the inferences, it is predominantly enabling infrastructure so that experimentation can be done on it, right? So, how is it that production or deployment is customer segment? Is it not people who would eventually be using it are the customer segments that will have to layer it and look through?
Yeah, so like so it was the like, so this was so that's a great question. So like so in general it would be like, we decided that it was kind of the AI engineers. This was more about segmenting when they were going to use the service. We were deciding kind of like when they were going to use the service, and it was in like the production deployment environment. So as they were ramping up their models, the service was going to so in like a classic deployment of like of a model, it kind of moves in like, in stages. So I was imagining it being more, I imagined it being more of like the AI engineer this is a monitoring tool to see how successful the service is at the time of deployment. Now, that's not saying that that's the only way that we could have gone here. We could have gone into like a much more like centric approach and been a little bit more specific here. And also, one thing to keep in mind is that like I was writing and typing some of these notes. These are like my actual notes for while we were doing the meeting. So that's probably could have been a little bit more detailed there. So hopefully that answers your question.
Sure, thanks.
Yep. Okay, cool. Yeah, like I guess go back to like key metrics. Does anyone have anything that they think would be interesting to add, or from this kind of product, or any other questions? I'm open either way.
How about the timelines of the project?
Sorry?
Timeline of the project?
Yeah, okay, sure.
Yeah, Chris, quick question. So what would potentially be counter metrics that you would consider that would deter adoption? What would be a good counter metric to think about this case?
I'm sorry, I think I only heard part of that, but I heard like a countermeasure.
Yeah, what would be a good counter metric for adoption in this case? Is that something you would consider in the key metrics?
Yeah,
because I do see this. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so like I kind of consider that as like I consider it as like adoption of the service, like adoption of the service, like how valuable it is for how valuable the particular potential service is. I guess like what I was imagining is kind of like percentage of total models or total engineers that were utilizing the service as to like how valuable it would be. And then there would also be like kind of a like we mentioned, somewhat like of a time to market for those developers. Is it actually down, based on their service and that kind of thing. That was kind of what I was imagining.
Hey, Chris, if I may add, maybe we could also consider the change in the number of teams that are actually spinning off their own instances or their own services. That way, they're not gaming the system by just using this because they had management pressure or whatever to consider this new system, but they went back to their own ways of doing things. So maybe we could track how many people actually switched and gave up on their own infrastructure.
Okay, yeah, no, that's great. Gave up on their own infrastructure.
Another improvement, another metric could be performance improvement in the teams that are using the service.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, and another I can think of as overall cost, given that one of the reasons for adoption is decentralized, and I believe it would be useful to figure out like, are there any cost savings essentially by collapsing?
Awesome. No, those are all great points, guys. So thank you for that. That's really helpful. That's really helpful and I think insightful on your guys' part. So one thing that happened is during this meeting is that you're facilitating a solution, right? You're facilitating a solution to get there. We never quite made it to like the actual solution, but it was more of the like program of like how we're going to build the solution. Now you'll see that we only made it through two steps or so of this before we kind of ran out of time. And we kind of talked a little bit about like communication planning and that kind of thing. But in general, like there was a number of different things that they wanted to consider along this process. So in general, there was parts about the disconnect between the UI engineer and the backend, how they were going to build this, when the API design would be ready, what models for inference benchmarking that they were going to build, and what solutions that they were going to look at. And it was a discussion about how long there was needed for them to come up with a recommendation for that. We kind of ended up on around 6 weeks. In general, one thing that Mahesh really helped me with on a guidance point of view is that things take longer than you would anticipate. So when they said 4 weeks, moved it to 6 and say like, hey, let's give you a little bit more time. It'll be more, and that is like always appreciated because it takes just these models. You think you're going to come up with a recommendation, there will be something else that comes up. So kind of buffering in that time a little bit more. And then in terms of the prototype design, it was really about building an API and user interface with the team here, and going from and considering how long that would potentially take and what the API structure would be, would determine how we would interface with that. We were also going to research we also decided that we were going to research amongst the core teams that would be early adopters of this, and decide how we would deploy it there. That was the other thing that we were doing as well. And then in tandem with that, develop kind of a communication strategy over 3 weeks as well. So that was kind of how the process went in terms of this. You'll see there's some other things as well. I wrote had some risks. One of the main risks for Bloomberg was they would run out of memory. The other thing is that one other thing that was challenging is that they were only going to be 95% have a 95% benchmarking accuracy rate, which the engineers viewed as somewhat problematic. But we kind of got past that in terms of like the MVP because essentially there was no service existing today, and so there was no centralized function at all in terms of creating that value. So we lived with the fact that we were going to be 95% accurate. We just had to make sure to tell the developers that it was only 95% accurate when we were launching. So that was like a few different things that we came up with. I'm sure that there's some other risks. Do you guys have like other risks or other things that you can kind of see from this as well? This is just the list that we came up with. It's by no means complete.
Yeah, one I can think of is centralized point of failure, especially when you consolidate platforms. This is one major risk that always comes up. A single point of failure, essentially.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm driving, but another thing that always these kind of service needs is a scheduling, and the service is as good as the scheduling, because now each team was able to access their own benchmarking. Now you centralized it. Now you need to put priorities because org has priorities. Everybody cannot just benchmark their models every day. So how the scheduler will be designed, what the scheduler will do, all that needs to be the core functionality of one of the core aspect of this service would be. I know you might have covered it already, but that's what I wanted to add as well.
Yeah, no, that's great. Actually, that came up quite a bit. So like one of the things that actually leads me into a thing. One of the bigger challenges that Bloomberg faces in particular is concurrence with their models and people kind of running it constantly and constantly benchmarking in a way, benchmarking too much. So this can kind of take over their and that was a big challenge that they said would be happening.
I would think, in fact, scheduling would be like one of the main features of this platform, right?
Yeah.
It can almost go out of the risk bucket and just become like a central aspect of the platform itself.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, 100% agree. Thanks.
Cool. So I'll kind of go back into a little bit of like the presentation again. And I'll share all this. I'll share these links. I have no problem sharing it with all of you guys. Like, feel free, take what I did. You can probably do it better next time. That's the whole point of doing this. For the team, is that we all get better at something, and that's part of what this community's for. So things that I think did, like, I did particularly well in this part. All right, so I had an idea of what the problem was, and got that right away. We got buy-in from like some of the engineers. We built a timeline. We were open to open source solutions. We agreed on key metrics in the communication timeline, and the prototype design, while pretty vague, at least it was considered. And we also had like kind of an agnostic data return from the API. So we agreed how we were going to build there. Now, this is probably the much more interesting part, in like what and you'll kind of see like kind of what I thought was interesting is that the customers were much less clear as to who we were going to build for. I thought that there was a lot of I thought that in terms of there was a tug and pull, let's say, that I guess I should have probably anticipated a little bit better, but in between what the technical architect was willing to commit to in terms of resources and what the solution would be, on one hand, the developer would say, I need as many resources as possible, and I can give you a magical solution. On the other hand, the architect said they wanted to know the solution before they built anything. So this is kind of a classic thing that happens here. I also like, you know, like, there was a lot of like what's happening without that, without the solution being debated, that we got into a little bit more. I think it probably could have cut that conversation off a little bit more, because we already decided that it was important to build it, but there was probably could have made it a little bit tighter and gotten a little further along had I cut that off. There was also like asking, had we done something like this before, or any type of benchmarking service or any type of inference centralized function before, was a really powerful question. It got me a lot further along than I probably would have otherwise. And it gave a lot of different insights into this. As I kind of already mentioned before, concurrency is a really big challenge, and the scheduling of that was something that we probably could have focused on a little bit more. I probably would have done a little bit better job there had I thought about it. The other thing that was very kind of surprising, I thought we were going to spend a lot of time on privacy and security. A lot of the discussion was like, these are prerequisites that are known. Let's not worry about them. We know that they're there, but like right now we're deciding what the solution is, and then we can talk after the fact about privacy and security. The other part here is that from a program manager, a little bit different. The process is a little bit different. I was as a product manager, I focused a lot on why we're doing something, and this is much more on like how. It's much more on what, when, and how, and what we're building. A lot of the other questions that go into product development. So it had a tendency to be a lot more broad. It was much more focused on the program rather than like the individual depth that's needed from a product point of view. So that was kind of like my take there. And then from like infrastructure standpoint, one thing I thought was really helpful was like kind of address a GPU and memory shortage, limit scope based on that limitation. So like one thing that was suggested halfway through was a recommendation service on top of the benchmarking service of how to optimize the model even further. We kind of ended up scrapping that because it would just bloat the scope tremendously. So that was really helpful from my point of view. Other part was really around the different capacities like through the dev cycle. I thought that like each phase that they were developing this process was knowing that infrastructure is kind of helpful. What would I do for next time? What I would do for next time? So there's a few learnings that I think that would be really helpful, and hopefully they're insightful for you guys as the cohort. One thing is that the development of these models, so and deployment of the model. So a lot of the stack is built on Kubernetes, and for them in serverless and having a serverless rollout. Had I known a little bit more about this, I probably would have had better. I would probably have had better questions and insights into what the solution ended up being, and just had a little bit more technical understanding around that. I really didn't get into like benchmark and service like expertise. So Mahesh mentioned, that you can develop better models and you have better benchmarks and add more GPUs and stuff like that. We didn't really get into that, and I could have done a better job of talking about that or the drift of the data there. The one thing we didn't really get into at all, and I think it probably would have been interesting to highlight, is who we were delivering across, which framework we were delivering across, whether it was going to be PyTorch or it was going to be TensorFlow or Onyx. We didn't discuss that at all. It was kind of just, I think, not really discussed, and it could have been an interesting point to further our customer segments even a little bit more, make that a little bit more valuable. But now I'll just kind of like so I'll answer some questions if anyone has some, and then more than happy to, like, you know, share data across this. So I have like you can see this giant list of questions that I have that I kind of built in terms of this, and you can see where Mahesh helped me as well with this with how I did this, how I built this prompt and the scenario, and how I thought about different challenges that are existing within that. Here's a link to the Lean Canvas and a few other things, but I'll answer any questions you have.
Hey, Chris, thank you for sharing. Awesome job. I know it sounds easy when you're sharing things, but, you know, being in the spur of the moment, you know, should have been like 20 times more complex for you to deal with people. How much of this, how much of preparation helped, like this mirror board and those things? Did you actually go and like create the mirror board on the fly, or did you actually have a framework?
Oh yeah, so like so let's talk about that, like, in general. So like this so I took this Lean Canvas. So if you go to this site, I'll send it out into the cohort. You can download this canvas, right? I took this and then made the Miro board beforehand. I had all of the notes and all of the sections beforehand. I kind of started with, imagine this as kind of a blank board where I had a bunch of post-it notes, Raghav. That's because otherwise I would have never have made it through anything, to be perfectly honest. They had
perfect. Makes sense.
all of the like the risk section, the additional notes, these were all designed so that I never had to leave the screen. And that anytime, and what ends up happening within this discussion is I kind of went through it linearly. That's not exactly how it happened, right? So like we started off in the problem statement, and I said, okay, and then someone would say, when do we want to launch this? And, you know, just like, okay, let's take a note down. We'll come back to that over here, but then and just kind of steering people back into it. So that's kind of like in general how it worked. Otherwise, yeah, I would highly recommend even the phases of solution. I had that set up before, so that I didn't have to create it.
And
great job. Thank you.
Ahead of time? Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Do you know the problem statement ahead of time for you to prepare all this?
I knew part of the problem statement. So I knew that there was going to be inference benchmarking. I did not know it was going to be latency focused. So that came as like so kind of like I asked why we were doing it in general, like why we need an inference benchmarking service, and then that's how that started there.
This is wonderful, Chris, and I think it's great of you to share your experience. Were there live people with whom you were facilitating who were trying to role play, or how was the setup? And did they tell you before the interview what it is going to look like?
They told me that there was going to be 2 developers, a project manager and a PM. The project manager ended up playing an architect, which I didn't anticipate. And but everyone else played a similar role. I knew that the developers would be on separate teams, but I anticipated that they would both be on AI teams and not on one being a front-end solutions engineer. So that was a little bit of a shock as well. So kind of some adjustment as that.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Hey, Chris.
Yeah.
Hey.
This was great. I really loved how you showed the Miro boards and just walked through the way you prepared. It's really useful. And I was wondering if some of the knowledge you said you wish you had in order to answer this question better, do you think that is because of the nature of the role, because it's a program manager role instead of a product manager role? Do you think that came in a bit?
I think some of it.
Mhm.
I
Go
think
for it.
some of it did, but I think some. Sorry, I finished through your question. I'm sorry. I tried to answer right away.
Oh no, I have a follow-up to that, so you can answer this and then I can ask you the follow-up after
Yeah,
this.
sure. So part of it, yes. So there was some parts that were there were some parts that were very like they were a little bit like higher technical bar, a higher technical bar than maybe I'm used to from a product management standpoint, to be perfectly honest. And part of that's just because you're having infrastructure conversation, and then another part of it is because it's the bar for a technical program manager is a little bit higher. So I studied a lot of like there's I'll also send out like resources like there's a CNCF has a ton of videos out there about like how the system works, and I found that really useful. But to say that I'm an expert by any means, I was like kind of prepping for an interview at the same time. So it was like not really, but I can say something that's not incredibly like crazy right away, right?
Yeah. And so did you think of solving this question as a product manager after your interview?
Yeah. So I did unfortunately like Bloomberg didn't have any product managers available at this time, but I will say this has helped me in a lot of different interviews beyond just this one, and kind of like set up a lot of stories that I built up, or like how I would think about different projects and how I'd imagine managing it. So I think that was helpful.
That's great. And so the last follow-up question, during your interview, you said you had a project manager, you were interviewing for a program manager, a technical program manager, and there was a product manager in
Yes.
your panel. So how was the dynamic between the three of you, and what were some of your takeaways?
Yeah, from like so the dynamics in general, well, the project manager was playing an architect, so hard to say that the dynamic would be the exact same in that scenario. But like I can kind of speak a little bit more to like the product manager and so the product manager has a service that they're wanting to offer, but they need other teams to buy in and drive this across a large portion of things. So think about it from the standpoint of like you're aiding the product manager create their vision. So like they have the depth of like everything in the nitty-gritty that's needed there, but the breadth of getting it across different teams, getting it across communication plans, getting the trainings done, all of that is like really kind of like a key to assisting that dream of being true and realized across the organization. So that was kind of like the dynamic in between us.
That's great. Yeah, thank you so much.
Of course.
All right, thank you so much, Chris. And this was really fun. Hope you guys all found this helpful. So I'm seeing one question from Shivangi on whether or not there's some good online resources to prepare for system design of AI systems. If anybody knows, feel free to just like share them here. Otherwise, we can talk more about it next week. I'm curious to know, Chris, if you have any suggestions.
Yeah, so there's a number of like I mentioned one. CNCF has a few decent ones. There's also, you can kind of see some of the architecture that's out there from like whether it be like towards data science has a few of them as well. And so you can kind of, or any kind of open source model will share how they're calculating this data. And those are helpful and interesting, something I want to continue to dig into.
Awesome, thanks so much. And Gaurav also suggested one, designing ML system. So hope you guys all enjoyed today's session. We have some good news. One is that we're gonna continue doing the community sessions going forward. So it's gonna continue happening every Saturday. We have a few other alumni that are also coming in to talk about what they've been working on or how they're currently using AI at their work. We have a few people that have recently landed AI product manager jobs. I'm hoping to get them to come and share their stories. Next week, I think the topic potentially right now, I don't know if Mahesh is still on the call. If he is, I think right now it looks like we might be talking about building your own GPT, and basically us kind of collaborating together during that session to go through that exercise. I think it's really, really important for us. To be honest, I've already built a few. I'm so addicted to them. So once you guys kind of learn this like new skill set of like building your GPT, and even going further, building things that kind of speak to each other as time goes by, I think you're going to feel more and more empowered. So thank you so much again, Chris, and I hope that everybody has a great weekend. We're going to upload a copy of this video on YouTube soon, and those of us that are in the cohort number 4, you'll be receiving a link to this also in the AI Product Manager cohort dashboard. And for those of you that you might want to consider joining the next cohort, here's the link. We haven't updated the dates yet. We don't know the information, but if you're interested, feel free to just go in there, submit your information. We'll be in touch with you once we know when the next cohort is going to be. All right. Thank you so much again. And I hope you all have a great weekend. Chris, anything else in the end you want to share?
No. Thank you for the opportunity to share my experience. I hope this is helpful for you guys.
Yeah, I think it was. And I can tell that people are already thanking you and they're saying this was a great session. So thanks so much, Chris, and have a good weekend, everybody. Bye.